Hey everyone, what's going on? So yesterday when I was at work, I was looking at Zach's blog, and I noticed that he blogged about this mainstream media story that involved the actor Sean Penn. And apparently Sean Penn was in Ukraine, and then Sean Penn is now leaving Ukraine to go to Poland. And Zach, in his blog post, he connected it to the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania bridge collapse that happened on January 28th earlier this year. And what's so interesting about this whole narrative playing out is I've been recently making all of these videos talking about, the horse theme and how it's related to boxing and the Statue of Liberty and a whole bunch of stuff, right? And a big thing is how I had synchronicity back in 2018 with this Family Guy episode where Peter Griffin meets Vladimir Putin, and then the picture, of course, shows him on the horse and such. But what's so interesting about this same time period is that I also had synchronicity on the exact same day that Donald Trump met Vladimir Putin, which was just a couple days before I had this synchronicity. The same day that Donald Trump met Vladimir Putin, July 16th, 2018, I also had synchronicity with the Family Guy episode called Hot Shots. And oddly enough, this Family Guy episode is all about vaccines, and they quarantine the town. And at the very end of the video, Stewie falls off this bridge, and he gets saved by Sean Penn. And Sean Penn is actually coming to the town to deliver a big thing of vaccines for the whole town. And then they do a whole thing about how everybody should be vaccinated and so on. And just think about that in relation to what's going on in the world right now, And what are the odds that I would have this synchronicity, the same day Donald Trump met Vladimir Putin, and then a few days later I went to blog about Donald Trump meeting Vladimir Putin, and then I had synchronicity. I looked up at the TV and there was the Family Guy episode where Peter meets Vladimir Putin, right? Big thing I've been talking about. So it's interesting that Sean Penn would be in the news right now. And what had happened with my synchronicity with this episode was that I was at work and my girlfriend messaged me about how our son Zamian, she was going to get his vaccines or something. And I didn't understand what she was even talking about. And it was confusing. And then I eventually found out that she had him a doctor's appointment for the next day to get his shots or whatever. And then the whole day after that, I was thinking about shots and autism and vaccines and everything else. And, my son doesn't have autism or anything like that. But I was thinking about it that day because she brought up vaccines and so on. And I came home from work and I sat down to talk to my girlfriend. And I looked up and it just so happened to be this episode of Family Guy on that was all about vaccines and Stewie getting vaccinated and the town being quarantined. And I was like, don't you find that interesting that earlier you were talking about that? And then, I sit down and you're watching the episode about vaccines and on Family Guy. That's just what was on the TV, And I pointed out how that episode title in gematria equaled 124, just like Family Guy equals 124. In the last video that I made, I also talked about how I had synchronicity with Family Guy the day that my son was born, and how it was linked up to the number 72, but I'll skip over that for right now. But my son, his actual due date was January 24th, but he was born on January 17th at 1:24. So, and then I made a video about the birth of him and how it was linked up to Family Guy, and a few months later, YouTube blocked my video worldwide. And it's just interesting that I made that video on 1:24, not even realizing, but I also talked about the number 124 in my last video and how it was synced up to the horse theme and the Kentucky Derby with that horse Authentic who won the Kentucky Derby. But let's go back and look at this old post here, because this post in 2018 about the synchronicity with Sean Penn and Family Guy, another big thing in this narrative was that it was connected to the bridge symbolism that I was following. And once again, think how Zach had connected Sean Penn to William Penn and the Pittsburgh Bridge collapse on January 28th earlier this year. And if you go back to 2018, a big thing that I was following like leading up to the Super Bowl, it had a lot to do with the bridge symbolism. For years, I've been following this narrative. When Rowdy Piper died, I started talking, and then we had the bridge water shooting, and they showed uh, Franklin Bridge or whatever on the picture. It looked like it said Franklin Bridge if you read it down. I've been talking about this narrative with Philadelphia and bridges, right? And notice this is just after Wendy Williams fainted wearing the Statue of Liberty costume, something I talked about in the previous video, and how Wendy Williams was linked up to the horse symbolism. And then the next day, we got the news that Wendy Williams' show is going to be canceled. But I started noticing this pattern because I was kind of following Philadelphia because of synchronicity I had had back after the Falcons lost in the Super Bowl. It was like a week. It was on 2/11 of 2017. I went to my grandma's house, and my uncle was there, my Uncle Clancy. My sister was also there. And my grandma lived on Eagle Street, and that day I found out that my Uncle Barney, who had just died, he actually didn't die from cancer. He died from the injuries he got in the car wreck, and a whole bunch of other stuff with that. But I started thinking about how my Uncle Clancy is his son is the only Eagles fan that I know, and this was on Eagle Street. And I found out my sister lived on Falcon Avenue that day. And then I later found out that her company that she owns is called Eagle Acres. And I was like, there must be something important to pay attention to the Philadelphia Eagles with this. And then, of course, later that year in 2017, my grandma died. And then my Uncle Clancy on Christmas Eve, his lung collapsed. And he ended up dying after the Super Bowl that year. He had died 72 days after the Super Bowl. And it was in connection to my son being born just before that Super Bowl. And I had synchronicity with the 72nd episode of Family Guy the day that he was born. And his name equals 72. And my friend called me and I went out into the hospital and talked to him for like an hour. His name equaled 72. And then I came back in and had the synchronicity with Family Guy, the 72nd episode. Well, lo and behold, that got my friend Cody is also linked up to my Uncle Clancy because he was even a pallbearer with us for my Uncle Clancy's funeral because we used to hang out at my Uncle Clancy's house all the time, watch football and get drunk, whatever. So he was like a good friend of my Uncle Clancy even. And my Uncle Clancy dies after the Eagles win the Super Bowl. And my sister was also linked up because they had this giant bull statue commercial. Right here, there's the town that my sister lives in. They have this giant bull statue, and there was a Super Bowl commercial that featured this. And the joke was they have the Super Bowl, and it was featured at the Super Bowl. And then I looked up the town, and the town was found by some guy like John Audubon, and he's famous for writing a book called The Birds of America, and of course the bird of America is the eagle. But just after the Super Bowl, and I'm just pointing out, look, I'm talking about the bridge symbolism here even, the movie Oblivion. I talked about it a whole bunch. Even when this Ed Lee guy died, I talked about how it was linked up to Pittsburgh, which is the city of bridges. And I thought possibly the Eagles would play the Steelers in the Super Bowl that year because it was linked to this bridge symbolism so hard. And just after the Super Bowl, we got the FIU bridge collapse in Miami, Florida, or right here, Miami bridge collapse. There's a pedestrian bridge that collapsed. And just after this, we got a girl from the town that my sister lives in die, and she drowned in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And if you've been following my recent videos, the big thing with the horse narrative all had to do with the date 2/19. And oddly enough, I had canceled my skiing trip. I was going to go on vacation that week to Breckenridge, Colorado. And I noticed that Breckenridge was on 39 degrees north. And that day, 2/19, was 3 months and 9 days after my 39th birthday. The word ski equals 39. If you write out skiing, it equals 39. And I ended up canceling it because it was too much money. But since my girlfriend still had the weekend off, we still went on vacation, and she suggested we go to some dinosaur thing that was up in Sioux Falls because it's a couple hours from where I live. And I noticed that Sioux Falls also equals 39 in gematria. I was like, I cannot escape this number 39. And I then remembered that I have this video from 2015 where I talked about this headline mainstream media story about my aunt's brother being shot in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. He was the principal at Harrisburg High School. and he got shot by this kid named Mason Buell. And I made this video on it, so I was like, I'm going to go back and watch that video. And when I watched it, I connected it a lot to Keystone. I don't know if I can type there, but Keystone. And I was talking about Mount Rushmore. There's a town called Keystone, but I was also talking about this train symbolism and how it was linked to Philadelphia and Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the Keystone State. Just think about Harrisburg, Kamala Harris, and then Joe Biden, who's also from Pennsylvania, the Keystone State. And that was interesting to me because Keystone in Gematria equals 39. And in my blogs leading up to this and past blogs, I've always talked about how when I was a kid, every time we went on a ski trip, we went to Keystone, Colorado. And Keystone, so I'm talking about Keystone in this old video about Sioux Falls. I end up canceling my skiing trip, and I go to Sioux Falls that also has this connection to Keystone and the number 39. But like I said, if you're following what I was talking about in relation to the date 219 for the last like 3 or 4 months, or since November-ish, I was talking about how it was linked up to some drowning theme as well. And then I got to Sioux Falls and I realized, I was like, hey, I was driving away from that dinosaur thing to go back to the hotel, and I kept seeing all these signs for Falls Park, and I was like, man, that sounds so familiar. And then it dawned on me that after the Super Bowl 52, that girl from the town that my sister lives in died in Falls Park. And I was like, so it is connected to the drowning theme. There's something that I was supposed to see with this. And of course, that girl's name equaled like 72, and the word river equals 72, and it was all about 72. I can't remember all the stuff with her, but it was all about the number 72, just like how my son was linked up to 72, just like how my uncle died 72 days after the Super Bowl that year. Also, the last person that died here, or there was 2 people, but one of them was named, like, this. There was a guy and a girl who died, but the guy who died, his name was Lyle Eagletail. And just think about that in relation to the Eagles and the Super Bowl and so on, right? And then just after the Super Bowl, we get this girl drowning, synced up to my sister in the Eagle narrative, and then Lyle Eagletail, and his name, I believe, even equaled 72. And I think just Eagletail equaled 72. So I knew there was some type of relationship with drowning and so on. And look, my Uncle Clancy, there's a video I talked about in the Eagle narrative. And I later started noticing how there was this big thing with the number 624, and it was also linked to bridge symbolism, right? And my uncle, he had died 6 months and 24 days before my birthday, and his name Clancy equals 624 in the Sumerian cipher. And my grandma, she died 6 months and 24 days before Clancy's birthday, or before Clancy died. And my son was born 6 months and 24 days after the date 624. I just noticed this big narrative, and it was also linked up to the stock market, something I've recently been talking about. And if you go back to the Super Bowl, a big thing I was talking about was also, the stock market crash. The day after the Super Bowl, we got this mainstream media story that said market meltdown and the stocks went down a whole lot and all that. But the Super Bowl was played in Minneapolis that had the famous bridge collapse on August 1st of 2007, I believe it was, right? It had that famous bridge collapse. But the Super Bowl was played in Minneapolis at U.S. Bank Stadium, and it was in the 88th anniversary of the stock market crash. And, the word Trump equaled 88. Trump had called out the kneeling. The word kneel equals 88. Colin Kaepernick equals 88. The Star Spangled Banner equals 88. U.S. Bank Stadium equaled 88. Herbert Hoover, H is the 8th letter, 88. So I knew there was something important to the stock market crash. And the very next day, we get that stock market story after the Super Bowl. U.S. Bank Stadium. And then, the national anthem stuff all goes back to Francis Scott Key, who was also born on August 1st, 8-1, which once again, that's the day of the Minnesota bridge collapse. And that, I can't remember all that either. It was like the main trusses were 81 meters long, and it took them 81 minutes to transport everybody to the hospital, and it fell like 81 feet or something. I can't remember all this stuff, but it was all about 81. And I started realizing that Golden Gate Bridge equals 81 in Gematria. And Pope Francis had just turned 81 years old, and the word pontiff means bridge builder. And there was a story about a train that had went off the tracks right around his birthday that year too. And it was like the DuPont, but it was off of a bridge. So I knew there was something important to bridges, right? And then somebody had told me the word pontiff means bridge builder. And I was like, huh, and he's 81 years old, and Golden Gate Bridge equals 81. And I think that year it was going to be the 81st anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge opening, too. I'm pretty sure 2018 was. And I just pointed out a whole bunch of stuff. 8 months and 1 day, like 81 after Pope Francis's birthday, was 81818 even. And I looked up the date 624, and it just so happened to be Pope Francis's 1929th day as the Pope. And I was like, that's interesting because that reminds me of the stock market. Because, the stock market crash happened in the year 1929. And we had also just had the Stoneman Douglas shooting that reminded us of the St. Valentine's Day massacre that happened in 1929, just before the stock market crash, right? And the more I looked into the year 1929, I found out that Vatican City actually became a sovereign nation in 1929 on the date 2/11, which was the same day that I had previously had the synchronicity with the eagle stuff at my grandma's house on Eagle Street. Of course, my Uncle Clancy's name in Francis Bacon equals 211, and so does his son's name, too. And also, if you look up the alchemical symbol for steel, it looks a lot like a 211 as well. Think about the Steelers, the City of Steel, Pittsburgh, bridges. There's a whole lot of stuff going on with this, how these narratives were interrelated. Oh, also, the Pope in 1929, when Vatican City became a sovereign state or whatever, that Pope died at the age of 81. And Pope Paul III, who was the Pope who fully approved the Jesuits, he also died at the age of 81. And the Jesuit anniversary is 81 days after 81 days before Pope Francis's birthday. And he had just turned 81 years old. And he's the first admitted Jesuit Pope and so on. So I was like, man, there's some crazy relationships here with bridges and the date 624. And I later found out all kinds of stuff about the date 624. It's the day that modern Freemasonry was founded. In the English extended cipher, if you write out Jesuit, it equals 624. It's also this day important to John the Baptist with the angel Gabriel. And if you go back to 2017, right after my uncle Barney died, linked up to the Falcons in the Super Bowl, it was all about the angel Gabriel and a bunch of stuff. So I was like, there must be something important to this. And then on my grandma's birthday, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle got married. And I noticed that if you write out King Charles III in the Satanic Gematria, it equals 624. And Prince Charles's birthday is 6 months and 24 days after Queen Elizabeth's birthday. So it's like there's this interesting, narrative with this number 624. And, how it links up to all this stuff. And I'm just trying to bring all this together because there was a lot of these interrelated narratives going on. And if you go back to around the same time that I was talking about Sean Penn, or having synchronicity with Sean Penn and whatnot, there was also a humongous drowning narrative that I had pointed out, right? And it had to do with the number 72. Like, I randomly thought of the band Drowning Pool, and I was at work and I listened to the band Drowning Pool. Let me just find it here really quick. It was on July 2nd. I just randomly wanted to listen to the band Drowning Pool. I forgot all about the band and whatever. I just turned it on my phone and I was like, man, there must be some reason that I want to listen to this so bad, So I took a screenshot of it just to remember the day. Because I knew there was something that, for some reason, it was so hard in my brain that I was like, there has to be something important to a Drowning Pool. So I took a screenshot and I didn't know, the purpose of it, but right around the same time, so this is July 18th, so I had that synchronicity with Sean Penn and Family Guy on July 16th. But right around that same time, I went to YouTube and it gave me this video to tell me to watch Chigozie Truth's video about the band Drowning Pool. Because Jeff Young had asked him to look into the band Drowning Pool and the death of the lead singer or something. And it was so random because he had no idea that I was talking about Drowning Pool and so on my blog, right? And I looked up Chigozi Truth, and in the satanic gematria, his name equaled 624. And, there's a whole bunch to it, but just think about Drowning Pool also equals 72, and that synchronicity happened on 72. And think about the girl who drowned in Sioux Falls, and her name equals 72. And Lyle Eagletail equals 72. And my uncle dying 72 days after the Super Bowl. And my son's name equals 72. And my friend's name 72. And the 72nd episode of Family Guy. Just see how this is all like crazy related. So I was like, man, there's something going on here. And we kept getting these drowning stories, such as like the Philadelphia XXX Tentacion, his cousin supposedly drowned in a pool in Jamaica, right? And this reminded us of Tupac, but he was linked to Stoneman Douglas and so on, but his cousin supposedly drowned in a pool. Then we got the death of some guy named Ray Emery right around this time. And he was the goalie for the Philadelphia Flyers. And it reminded me of the Mighty Ducks because in the movie The Mighty Ducks, that is also set in Minnesota, where the Super Bowl was held earlier that year, Goldberg is the goalie, and he says he's going to be moving back to Philly, and then he never moves back to Philly, and there's never any other mention of it in the movie. At the very beginning, he's like, I'm going to be moving back to Philly. And he was the goalie, so then we get this goalie, Ray Emery of the Philadelphia Flyers, who drowned in a pool or whatever, and I was like, there's has to be something to the Mighty Ducks and drowning and something. And then a few days after this, we got this story about 11 people drowning as when the duck boat drowned. The duck boat capsized in Missouri, and 11 people drowned. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. 11 people drowned on a duck boat just days after I'm talking about how there's this drowning theme synced up to the Mighty Ducks and Goldberg. And that was all about the number 39 as well. And, 2 weeks later, Goldberg, the goalie, got arrested. And they gave us that story on August 6th, this big day of 2022 I keep talking about. And that same day, we got like Alex Jones kicked off of social media. And Pink, the singer, canceled her show in Australia and a whole bunch of stuff. I'll leave some video links in the description. It's way too much to talk about. But I'm just showing how all these narratives like kind of come together. If you really know what I'm talking about and are paying attention to what I've been saying, it all like links together. But the word duck is 39. That's why we just got that story about Jussie Smollett and his trial and all that right around the time that I was talking about all this drowning stuff. And let's even go back to November here. I had another synchronicity with Chigozi Truth back in November. Let's see here. Yeah, November, I blogged about it November 24th at least, but I was talking about how there was something to do with boats again and drowning. And then I think it was the next day or a couple days later, we got the story about the migrant boat that sank off of in the English Channel, right? A migrant boat sank in the English Channel. And then I got a notification of Chigozi Truth's video about it, which is weird because I barely ever get notifications for anybody. And then I rarely ever get one from him, but I got one that day. And it was about him doing this thing. So I knew there was something important to that drowning narrative. And, I had been talking about like this drowning narrative. I even pointed out how it's linked up to my son here and a whole bunch of stuff, So I even talked about, involve my son in vaccines, right? I even talked about this Sean Penn blog post in that post. And I even talked about Bridges and Rocky and so on. I mean, if you just watch my last like 5 videos, I've talked about all of this. And Rocky also equals 72, and there's 72 Rocky steps. And Sylvester Stallone had turned 72 years old in 2018, and Donald Trump had turned 72 years old in 2018. But the whole point of me bringing all this back up is that when I was talking all about this drowning narrative back in 2018, I also mentioned how it was linked up to my dad. My son, he was born like really in connection to my dad. And it's funny because my dad, he cannot pronounce the letter Z. He pronounces it as the letter S. So he calls him Samian instead of Zamian. And I never even thought about that when we named him, you know. The name just kind of came and we left it. And then I was like, you know what? My dad's not even going to be able to pronounce his name because he cannot pronounce the letter Z. And no big deal, whatever, you know. But I just remember thinking that when we first named my son that. And then my son was linked up to my dad. I can't remember how it was all linked up. I have a post in here somewhere about it. But like my son's name equaled 192 and my dad's name's 192. And he was my son was also linked to the Jesuits a whole lot. He was born like 3 months and 21 days after the Jesuit anniversary, and his name also equals 84 like Jesuit. I think he was born 84 days before my dad's birthday, is what it was. And my dad's name in Satanic equals 927 like the Jesuit anniversary. And there was just a whole bunch of these connections to my dad and my son. And oddly enough, my dad, he cannot swim. Like, you know, think about not being able to swim and drowning. And my mom is the manager of the swimming pool in town. So it's just kind of oxymoronic that my mom's the manager of the swimming pool and my dad can't swim because he like grew up on the farm and they never really got to go swimming. They always like did chores and like his brothers don't know how to swim and so on. Like, but you know, I brought all this up, how it was linked to there's something to my dad with this whole narrative. And when I was making a video talking about the Chigozi Truth Sync, uh, Reagan Bowen, a guy who's commented on my stuff tons of times, you know, it's not a troll or anything. He said he was messaged me about how he was just searching on the gematria calculator and he noticed that Dennis Michael Barrett came up with the number 192 and he asked me if that was related to me. And I said, yeah, that's my dad. And I just thought it was odd that there was so many other numbers that could equal that, but my dad's name was on there in his search, you know? And then I was like, my dad can't swim, and there's this big drowning narrative, and so on. And I had also been following a Jesuit narrative with the word father that was important. I knew there was something important to father symbolism. And I noticed the word father equaled 624, and the word drowning equaled 624. And a few days after this, even, I got a flat tire, and I went over to my dad's house because he has a tire machine. And I noticed on my dad's truck, his license plate said 624 on it even. That's the number on his license plate. 624 and then some letters. I can't remember what they are, but it was like 624, you know? And then I was also going to be, I got asked to DJ a pool party that year, just a few days before that. And I was like, man, hopefully no kid drowns at the pool that night or something. And then I went to this bar. I went to the bar in town one night and my friend was hitting on some girl that was like, she's like probably 8 years younger than us. And she was telling my friend how I saved her brother at the pool, like when he almost drowned at the swimming pool, because I was a lifeguard growing up. And I was like, what are the odds she brings that story up out of all the things? You know, I don't really know her that well. I mean, sort of know her. And she brings up the story about how I saved her brother from drowning in the pool. And oddly enough, she comes to our house once a week right now because she's a counselor and she talks to my daughter and so on. So that's pretty weird. And her father had died in 2018. He had recently died. So I was like, hopefully my dad doesn't die or anything like that. And I started thinking it was connected to my dad's father and this number 63. And I thought that my grandpa would die when my dad turned age 63. And my grandpa ended up dying just a month shy of my dad's 63rd birthday on the date 3/10. And that was right when coronavirus was big. So you couldn't even go to his funeral and whatever else. And I'll bring this back up, but there's an interesting thing with the date 3/10 here. But, you know, I guess I'm just trying to point out all this symbolism. Reagan Bowen also equaled 624. And he's the guy who commented to me about my dad. And then I see that drowning is 624 and father is 624. And I also, in the mix of all this, making these videos, somebody did comment on one of my old videos from June 29th, 2017 about Stilo Brim's nephew drowning in a pool, too. They wrote, haha, I have no idea what the hell you're insinuating, but I'm sure it's a load of bullshit. And I was like, I'm uploading all these videos and whatever, and then now somebody's commenting on this old video about drowning in a pool with steel brim and Steelo, right? Think about it. Steel, Steelers, City of Bridges. So I knew there was something. And this was right around the time of that father symbolism, too. Because we had the USS Fitzgerald right after I started talking about how I had that synchronicity with priests in South Park and, uh, how Father Howard Fitzgerald, we've joked that he molested me as a kid and then he got busted for molesting a kid. And then, like 2 weeks after I blogged about that, we got the story about the USS Fitzgerald that happened over by Korea or whatever. But I want to get into the meat of all this now. I had to go back and explain a lot of these things because I went back and I was listening to some of my videos that I had made around this time, right? Talked about the synchronicity with Family Guy. Then I made this other video talking about how I had the synchronicity with Reagan Bowen and hey everyone, how's it going? The drowning stuff with my father. But if you listen to the video around like 18 something here, let me see here. 9 days before. If you listen to the video, what I say in this video is, I wonder if there's something important to 9 days after, or 9 days with this, because before that FIU bridge collapse, I had this dream that my dad died, and it was 9 days before. And then I got this notification for Enter the Stars video on the FIU bridge collapse, and he said that he dreamed it. And hope that makes sense. So 9 days before the FIU bridge collapse, I had this dream that my dad died, but my Uncle Clancy was alive, and he was at the funeral. And that was odd because my Uncle Clancy was in the hospital and we knew he probably wasn't going to make it much longer. And, I'm just trying to think here. But it was 9 days before the FIU bridge collapse. And then I got a notification on the day of the FIU bridge collapse for an Enter the Stars video. And he said that he had a dream about it. He dreamt that there was going to be a building collapse or a bridge collapse or something like that. And then he goes on to talk about how the only other time he had a prophetic dream was like that was a month before his dad died. He had a dream about his father dying. And I was like, well, that's pretty odd that I just had this dream about my dad dying. And then Enter the Stars is talking about how he had a dream about his dad dying, and it was 9 days before. So I thought there was something synced up to 9 days before. I just want to point it out real quick. But, just interesting. So I'm wondering, there's all this bridge symbolism. I'm wondering if there's something really important to bridges coming up maybe 9 days from now. Or, last time I had that dream 9 days before. So maybe in 9 days, there's something really significant to bridges. Maybe there'll be another bridge collapse or, possibly there's going to be. So this 9 days, right? And what's so interesting is I had synchronicity with this song called Absolutely by the band 9 Days. 9 days before the bridge collapsed in Pennsylvania, or in Pittsburgh this year, January 19th here. I talked about this French guy dying in a skiing accident and how I had canceled my skiing trip and my sister was the one who set the skiing trip on, and I had synchronicity with the song called Absolutely. And the lyrics in that song are, "This is the story of a girl who cried a river and drowned the whole world." Right? I mean, it's pretty interesting that it's had to do with drowning as well. And I blogged about this guy, and I talked about how my sister wrote absolutely because I had just canceled the skiing trip or whatever, and she wrote absolutely, and then I got a notification from this person, and they wrote absolutely, and I was like, well, that's pretty odd. My sister writes absolutely, and then I see this notification that I got that says absolutely, and it made me think of the song by 9 Days called Absolutely, and whatever. I looked up that song. I had some more synchronicity. It had to do with France, and that guy was a French skier. But I pointed out how that was 39 days after my sister's birthday. And think about my skiing trip that was all about the number 39. And I pointed out how my sister's name equals 128, and how 9 days later would be January 28th, 128, right? And then we get that bridge collapse in Pittsburgh on that same day. So there was a bridge collapse 9 days later, and that's something I talked about in these old videos that had to do with Sean Penn and so on. And what's even funnier is if you go back to this old post I talked about Family Guy and Sean Penn, I talked about how it was connected to Pittsburgh and so on, because they, in the Family Guy episode, they make a reference about Sean Penn portraying Harvey Milk. And they're like joking about it. Harvey Milk was the first gay elected official in San Francisco, and he got murdered by Dan White in 1978, just before the Steelers went on to win the Super Bowl. And he got murdered with the mayor of San Francisco named George Moscone, or George Moscone, however you pronounce it. But they got murdered like 55 days before the Steelers went on to win the Super Bowl. And what was so interesting, before Super Bowl 52 with the Eagles, the one I thought the Steelers would possibly be in, we got the death of the San Francisco mayor, Ed Lee. And he was the last San Francisco mayor to die in office since George Moscone had died with Harvey Milk. Once again, Sean Penn portrays Harvey Milk. Think about the Golden Gate Bridge, Harvey Milk, San Francisco. Ed Lee also died on 12/12, and that was interesting because that's the day that Pennsylvania became a state. 12/12/1787, 12 plus 12 plus 17 plus 87 equals 128. And William Penn equals 128. And Sean Penn equals 128. And bridge collapse equals 128. That's why we got the bridge collapse in Pittsburgh on January 28th. But notice this guy also died at age 65, and Philadelphia equals 65. Philadelphia founded on the day leaving 65 days in the year. But the word bridge collapse also equals 65 in gematria. And it really wouldn't seem like much, but when you read the article, it talked about how Ed Lee was known for building bridges. Like, I don't know where it says it for sure, but it says somewhere in the article that he was known for building bridges. And I even went on to talk about the Minnesota Bridge collapse and then how he was replaced by London Breed. That reminds us of London Bridge. And I talked about Ben Roethlisberger and how his name's Big Ben, which also reminds us of England. And, Big Ben, London Breed. That was another reason why I was following August 11th way back when. And then we started following it big time with the Tisha B'Av stuff. It was because London Breed was born the same day as Hulk Hogan. And if you go back to that Roddy Piper, Philadelphia, Ronda Rousey narrative that I was following, it was all linked up to Hulk Hogan as well. Hulk Hogan getting his revenge against Earthquake in Philadelphia and a whole bunch more. And I noticed her birthday was the same day as Hulk Hogan, so I thought that was going to be an interesting narrative. And then everyone started talking about August 11th, 2019, and I was saying, hey, look at this. It's all linked up to San Francisco, and the Golden Gate Bridge and so on. But, think about how Ben Roethlisberger also announced his retirement this year on January 27th, the day before 128. And, that's the day we got the Pittsburgh Bridge collapse, the same day that Joe Biden was going to Pennsylvania to talk about infrastructure. Then a bridge collapses. And on that same day, we got the story about Queen Elizabeth and how she has her own ketchup now. Think about how the Pittsburgh Steelers play in Heinz Field and how, Queen Elizabeth has her own ketchup and Heinz. And even more interesting is that the big thing with this new Batman movie that's coming out, but in the Dark Knight Rises, something I've been talking about a whole lot, after Bane blows up the football stadium that has the teams that resemble the Steelers and the Ravens, and then they were the team who played after the Batman movie came out, or the Ravens won the Super Bowl after the Batman movie came out in 2012, but after he blows up the football stadium, he blows up all the bridges in town. And the player who runs the ball back is Heinz Ward, the Pittsburgh Steeler player. Heinz, think about Heinz Stadium, Heinz Ward. And I pointed out in my blog post about this Pittsburgh collapse or whatever. Let's see here. Let's type in Pittsburgh really quick. But in my blog post, when the Pittsburgh-Bridge collapse happened, I even talked about how it's connected to the new Batman movie that's coming out today, actually. 3, 4. Let's see here. And there's also like isn't it a rocket that's supposed to hit the moon and stuff like that today? Maybe it already did. Let me see if I can find my post here. Well, I talked about, that's interesting. I don't remember this, but the Golden Gate Bridge anniversary is 8 months and 1 day before the Pittsburgh Bridge collapse. Big Ben Roethlisberger. Pittsburgh Steelers equal 81. Golden Gate Bridge equals 81. All the Minnesota Bridge collapse at 8-1. $124 days even. That's interesting with what I talked about in the beginning. But look, Pittsburgh Bridge collapse 36 days before the Batman releases. Once again, Hines Ward and so on. And yeah, 36 days. And if you write out the word bridge, it equals 36. I feel like I wrote that in here, but I don't see it anywhere. I don't see that I wrote that in here, but that's what I was alluding to, is that the word bridge equals 36, right? 36. This is also why it was important my son was born on January 17th, right? Because the word bridge also equals 117. But what I did point out was today is a span of 36 days before the Batman comes out, and the very final game of the season this year was of the Steelers. They played the Baltimore Ravens of the regular season. And just before that game, they honored this player, Terrell Suggs, and they pinned a picture of him wearing a Bane mask on his entrance on Twitter. And, I knew there was something important to the Batman thing when they did that, but let's see here. Yeah, and I talked about the song Absolutely and how the girl drowned and so on. So it's just interesting. I also talked about how bridge collapse equals 254, which, holy cow, that just makes so much sense to what I'm going to make another video talking about Family Guy and The Simpsons and South Park and how they all have to do with horses with Vladimir Putin. But it's a lot to do with this number 254. But before they blow up the football stadium, they flashed the number 322, the number of skull and bones. And skull and bones equals 254, so just like bridge collapse. So it makes a lot of sense. Plus, my sister's birthday is the same day as John Kerry's. Think about John Kerry and Skull and Bones, and how George Bush is going to be 76 years old this year on 7/6. And Skull and Bones also equals 76, and that's the day that Sylvester Stallone turned 76 years old. And so I'm definitely interested to see what goes on in this new Batman movie, that's for sure. Something very significant to this new Batman movie. But let's look at this Ed Lee guy again really quick. What I pointed out was that he died 55 days before Super Bowl 52. And his birthday was also 5/5. And Minneapolis equaled 55, and that's where Super Bowl 52 was held. And Minnesota equaled 52. That's why they had Super Bowl 52 there. But the reason I thought that was interesting was because when George Moscone died with Harvey Milk, they died 55 days before the Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Cowboys in the Super Bowl, in Super Bowl 13. So 55 days, and then this guy died 55 days before the Super Bowl, which is why I thought maybe the Eagles were going to play the Steelers in the Super Bowl, and the Steelers are the city of bridges and, steel and the Golden Gate Bridge. And this guy's birthday is also interesting too, 5/5, because that's the day that Russian plane crash happened that I'm talking about in my previous videos. The Russian plane fire, the day after I got the comment about Vladimir Putin in a plane, and then the next day we get a Russian plane fire in the news on 5/5. Of course, 5/5 is a really important day. Like, especially into France. France is very important. We just had that story about France saying the worst is yet to come and a whole lot more. But Just trying to think here. 5-5. Plus, Russia invaded Ukraine on the 55th day of the year in Russia. So, but earlier I talked about my grandpa dying, right? And how my grandpa died on the date 310. Well, that's interesting because 9 days after this Sean Penn story just so happens to be the date 310. And 310 is this big number that was important to France in 2019 with that Tisha B'Av narrative. And the Batman narrative is all about the number 86. And I keep talking about this date, August 6th, 2022, which was when Tisha B'Av begins. So I feel like there is something definitely symbolic to this day still. Like it just seems like everything kind of is pointing to this day for some reason. But I'm also watching August 10th. That's another very important day to this whole symbolism. August 10th and August 11th were very, very important. But August 10th was the bigger one for me because that's the day that Herbert Hoover died. And that's the day that was all linked up to Iowa and Slipknot. That's the day that, was important to Donald Trump saying he was Batman at the Iowa State Fair. That's why Slipknot played at the Iowa State Fair on August 10th in 2019. It's also the 222nd day of the year. And think about all the 22 stuff with Joe Biden coming out at 2/22 on 2/22/22 and putting sanctions on Russia and so on. It's also, another big thing I was talking about in 2018 was how I discovered more about the stuff with the Cubs and the Indians and how they related to the number 624. And Rocky Colavito, the curse of Rocky Colavito is real important, and his name equaled 624. He was traded for Harvey Keene that equaled 624, and a whole bunch more. I don't want to go and re-explain it, but his birthday is August 10th, 810, or 10/8, and that's why it was so important that the Indians played the Cubs in the World Series in 2016, and the Cubs were all linked up to the number 108, because it was all back to the curse of Rocky Colavito with the Indians. And what else is interesting, too, after this guy died, then, like I said, they nominated London Breed to become the acting mayor, but she wasn't actually the full-time mayor. They re-elected the guy Mark Farrell on 123, and he became the 44th mayor of San Francisco, right? Think how the word earthquake equals 44. And 123 just so happens to be 4 months and 4 days before the anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge. And then we got the FIU bridge collapse on the Ides of March, which just so happened to be the 44th mayor of San Francisco's 44th birthday. So I know the whole narrative is somehow related to the Golden Gate Bridge and so on. And the Golden Gate Bridge also, in relation to the date August 6th, 2023 will be the 86th anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge. If you go from, it's 2 months and 10 days. The 85th anniversary is 2 months and 10 days before August 6th. And that's interesting to me because San Francisco, California equals 210. So, hold on, I want to see what the Ides of March to 527 was. It was 73 days. I don't even remember what that guy, Mark Farrell, what his name in gematria was. I'll look that too. And the FIU bridge collapse is also interesting because my cousin Ryan, 52, like after Super Bowl 52, but my cousin Ryan, who is the only Eagles fan that I know, he lived in Miami at the time, like in the Miami area and so on, when the FIU bridge collapse had happened. So 167, the 39th prime. But I know this video is not going to make sense to anybody who hasn't followed me. I'll leave links in the description, but I just wanted to point out, it's weird that I say 9 days, and then I have that, the thing with my sister 9 days before, and I have sync with 9 days, then we get that Pittsburgh bridge collapse. Then Zach's connecting the Pittsburgh bridge collapse to Sean Penn. You know what I'm saying? And then my sister's name equaled 128, and then we get that bridge collapse on that same day. Sean Penn, William Penn. Oh, another interesting thing about Batman in relation to I know I wrote it in here. But in relation to Batman, William Penn's charter that he got, where he got Pennsylvania from King Charles or whatever, he actually asked for that on June 24th, right? 624. And then it was actually granted on March 4th. So that's the same day this Batman movie comes out. It's also, I guess, today now, March 4th. So we'll see. We'll check out the news or see if anything symbolically happens today. Pretty interesting. That'd be the same day as the Batman. You know. Just want to go through my post here. It was all jumbled up because I'm trying to like piece together how all these things are coming together, but it all goes back to this. I've just been recently talking about my son and how he was linked up, and this goes back to my son yet again and how he was born and synced up to the bridge symbolism. Look, Sean Penn, 254, San Francisco, 254, William Penn, bridge collapse, skull and bones in regards to Batman. San Francisco also, remember there was that story about the Batman kid or whatever? I can't remember, they had the town do a Batman theme or something a few years back. Talked about drowning. Oh yeah, and we had that building collapse this year or last year on 624, the Surfside apartment complex. And I talked about that, how it was connected to my dad, right? Because Enter the Stars had that dream about a building that collapsed, and he said that, basically that dream was pointing to that FIU bridge collapse. And I was like, well, building and bridge aren't the same thing. But then I thought it was interesting. He said he had that dream about his dad dying and whatever. But it was about a building collapse. And then this year we get a building collapse in Miami, and it was on the date 624. So I knew there was something linked up to that. Yeah, this old blog post, I talked about how it was on 624, and I started thinking about my Allen Iverson stuff too, because YouTube had I had an Allen Iverson video in 2019 that they restricted on the date 3/6, the 65th day of the year, the same day that Zach LaVine made a game-winning shot over the Philadelphia 76ers. Of course, Zach LaVine equaled 65, and it was like the 76ers' 65th game of the season or something like that, and a whole bunch of stuff, And then on the date 6/5, YouTube completely removed my Allen Iverson video. And it was about the Philadelphia and bridge and false flag type stuff. And, Philadelphia equals 65. And they were founded on the day leaving 65 days in the year. But 3/6 is also the day I had that dream about my dad. And that was 9 days before the FIU bridge collapse. So, and that was also the year that Ronda Rousey joined the WWE, right? She came out at the Royal Rumble, think about earthquakes, in Philadelphia, and then pointed to the sign that she was going to come out and her first match was going to be at WrestleMania 34, or whatever WrestleMania it was that year, in 2018. Yeah, WrestleMania 34. And what was even more interesting about that is that Ronda Rousey, her original debut in WWE was at WrestleMania 31 that was held in San Francisco, and she was brought into the ring by The Rock, who was from San Francisco area, and they had drama with Triple H and Stephanie McMahon or whatever. And then in WrestleMania 34, Ronda Rousey ended up fighting what was it? There wasn't a Triple H and Stephanie McMahon in her first ever match in the WWE and so on, because it was all linked up to San Francisco. And at WrestleMania 31, Triple H came out dressed like the Terminator, and they showed the clip of the new Terminator movie that has the car wreck on the Golden Gate Bridge. So it's interesting there was that, just interesting there was a collapse on 624 in Miami again, reminding me of the stuff that I'm talking about, the FIU bridge collapse. And even the Ides of March equals 624, the day of the FIU bridge collapse. There was also a bridge collapse in 2018. I can't remember the day of it, but it was linked up to the Cleveland Indians. And once again, Rocky Colavito was all linked up to the 624 narrative with Cleveland. There was also a holy fire in, wasn't it Cleveland National Forest or whatever it was? There was a holy fire. That's what they called it on August 6, 2018 that year. And it was in some park in California that's named after Grover Cleveland, and Grover Cleveland died on 6/24, right? And he died the same year that the Chicago Cubs had last won the World Series in 1908, right? 108 days before that World Series began. Think about how the Cubs had won 108 years, and that's another reason why it was interesting with the Cleveland Indians to be the team where they broke that curse of the Billy Goat and so on. And curse of the Billy Goat, think about Freemasonry and riding the Billy Goat or whatever, or riding the goat, and how modern Freemasonry founded on 6/24. So there's just a lot of interesting parallels to this number. It was a huge number I talked about in 2018 with the drowning and bridge collapses and all kinds of stuff. We also had that bridge collapse in, or was it a building collapse? A building collapse in Nigeria in November, and I also connected it to the same theme with France. And France is just really, really important. I have to read through this again. I don't know how to explain what all I was talking about here, but it was linked up to Nigeria and how it went back to the Father FIU bridge symbolism. I recently talked about the Royal Rumble that was synced up to UFC as well in Cameroon. The word father's 310 as well. My dad's father died on 310. That's 9 days after Sean Penn stuff. I wonder about 3/9 as well. The date 3/9, because that'd be a span of 9 days. And think about how I'm 39 years old and 2/19 was 3 months and 19 days after or 3 months and 9 days after my 39th birthday, and so on. Possibly an interesting day there. June 24th, 2 months, 29 days before 22/9, which is the anniversary of the French Republic. All that stuff with 310 as well. If you go 2019, 310 was like this humongous thing. It was all linked up to France and the date August 10th. Because August 10th is the day that the French monarchy was overthrown. And that's also World Lion Day. And then we had that Ethiopian airline crash on 310 that was linked up to the Buffy the Vampire Slayer stuff. And all of that had to do with France. It was like really, really connected to France. And it was also why Slipknot was playing at the Iowa State Fair on that day. And they played with the French band. And 5/16 is the day leaving 229 days in the year. It's a big day important to Nelson Mandela, too, who was the president of South Africa for 5 years, 1 month, and 6 days. And that was all linked to NASCAR, too, that year. And then my next son was born on the same day. I was watching for the date August 31st, because I thought someone in NASCAR or racing would die that day, and it was all linked up to France and Bill France owning the founding NASCAR and so on. And on the very same day that happened, or August 31st, it was linked with Dale Earnhardt Jr. doing a race in tribute to his father in the Hellman's car or whatever at Darlington. But that very same day, my son Alistair was born, and he was born in connection to the number 72 and Alistair Crowley. So there's something interesting there. But Antoine Hubert died that day, and he was the French racer. And so that's the anniversary of Princess Diana dying. It's the day that Apollo Creed dies. He gets killed by the Russian. But 310 was also that big day with the Ethiopian airline crash that was linked to the Lion of the Tribe of Judah, Haile Selassie. It was a humongous day. Like, I had so much synchronicity with that day and how it was linked up to a bunch of narratives. I also had a dream theme back in September that I was talking a whole lot about too, with psychics and so on. How I had a dream that my friend's father was going to die, and then he died the very next day. And it turns out that her mom is actually a psychic who I just still haven't went and talked to. But let's go back to this old post really quick. So, or this new post, but talk about the FIU bridge collapse, my grandpa dying that day, Florida equals 124, Family Guy 124. My kids are being crazy in the background here. I'm sorry. I shut the door a million times, but they just keep coming back in. But 128, important to World War. Let's see. I feel like I covered pretty much all this. Sean Penn's birthday is August 17th, typically the 229th day, the big France number. You know what else is interesting about my synchronicity with Family Guy and Sean Penn was that it was actually on 716, which is the 197th day of the year. And Sean Justin Penn equals 197. And this recent story was 197 days after his birthday. And the 45th prime number is 197. The word bridge equals 100 or equals 45. So it's interesting. My old synchronicity be on the 197th day of the year involving Sean Penn, whose name equals 197. And back then I pointed out the 45th prime is 197. Now we get this new story. 197 days after his birthday, on 3/1 of all days. That's the day that in 2018 that Vladimir Putin boasted his military might and had a video of nukes hitting Florida. So it's a very interesting, there's a very interesting thing going on here. Plus the word tiger equals 31. It's the tiger year. Don't Steelers equal 31 as well? Don't Steelers. Maybe I'm crazy. Yeah, Steelers equal 31. And 129 and 225, like the word horse. Huh. What's Pittsburgh? That's interesting. Pittsburgh Steelers. 81, this 243. August 31st is the 243rd day of the year. It's interesting. Steelers, 31. It's on 3/1. Florida has that connection to the 124 and horse and bridge collapse, so it makes sense. We'll just leave it there. I'm going to make one more. I'm going to make a shorter video because it's like stupidly. It'll be a lot shorter, and it'll show you the horse narrative with all of these old cartoons and new cartoons are all linked up to the horse theme with Vladimir Putin. And, even if he is a lover of horses, it's like, what are the odds that all these big cartoons like The Simpsons and South Park and Family Guy, they all like have to do something with him and a horse? I mean, there's like a million other like narratives you could use with Vladimir Putin that don't involve a horse, but yet they all do use a horse when they show him in the cartoons. So hopefully this makes sense, but once again, in regards to the horse symbols too, let's just point this out really quick. I was at work the other day and I was like, it just dawned on me that Sylvester Stallone, I remember a story about him falling off of a horse or something, and I can't find the story anymore. But that's when I found out he was like really short, and I was like, man, he always seems like a big guy on TV and whatever, but he's not actually very big. But apparently, he loves horses, but his name, Stallone, actually comes from the Italian word stallion. Think about Italian stallion, but the word stallion is a male horse, right? So he has this connection even to horses, so very interesting. But oh, you know what? This is another. I better talk about this before I turn this video off too, because I went back and I rewatched the Hot Shots episode with Family Guy and whatever, and they even do a joke with horses in this episode. And they talk about, there's a joke with John Goodman and horses. And, this hot shots equaling 124 and so on. It's really interesting because although he's not a fat comedian per se, if you go back to 2016, I started talking about this fat comedian narrative, and it all had to do with the number 124 and how all these fat comedians die in connection to the 124. Chris Farley died to 124, or his name is 124. John Belushi died on 124. John Candy's last movie was like Wagons East, and it equaled 124. And it all had to do with Jeff Bridges. I can't remember the whole narrative, but there was a guy named David Huddleston who was in The Big Lebowski, and he died 124 days before 12/4, which was Jeff Bridges' birthday. And Jeff Bridges, of course, is the biggest character in The Big Lebowski. And he hates the fucking Eagles in that movie, right? Think about the Eagles narrative with that. But think about his name, Jeff Bridges. And anyway, I just noticed this pattern, and I started pointing out in that movie, The Big Lebowski, a big joke is that they go to that grocery store or whatever called Ralph's. And he even writes the check, and it has the date 9/11 on it. But John Goodman's also in that movie, and he's in the movie called King Ralph. And, just thinking about it, Ralph's, King Ralph. So I started thinking about Ralphie May, and then Ralphie May, he ended up dying 1 month and 24 days after that video that I had put out about how fat comedians die by the number 124. And then just after that, we had the fat comedian named Kevin Meaney die, and his name equaled 124. And I'm just seeing this with John Goodman and the horses, and now I'm like, maybe we need to pay attention to him, although he's not a comedian. I don't know if he's going to die or if there's just something, maybe I need to watch The Connors or something, There's something important to John Goodman that is linked up to this, There has to be, especially seeing horses around him in this episode. And he also portrays Fred Flintstone, which was really important to my uncle later dying that year, because my uncle was married to Betty, and his name was Barney, like the Flintstones, and a whole bunch more. This guy was Fred Flintstone, and the King Ralph, it starts off in Las Vegas, and then Ralphie May died in Las Vegas right after the Las Vegas attack, and Ralphie May was from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and that's where my grandma Murphy was from, the one who died in connection to the Eagles. So, Jeff Bridges, maybe pay attention. I want to pay attention to Jeff Bridges too. He just had cancer and all that. Jeff Bridges. And further, I know that it's important because this episode, Hot Shots, came out 219 days before John Goodman's birthday. And 219 is that big horse number, right? It's a humongous number with horses. I was watching the date 219, and then I realized it was all about horses. Then we get Medina Spirit dying 219 days after the Kentucky Derby in Kentucky equals 219. It was 2 months and 19 days after the owner's birthday. I haven't watched Rambo, but I feel like Rambo, it's been years since I watched Rambo, but I feel like somebody pointed out that Rambo fights the Russians in one of the movies. I really can't remember. I have not seen Rambo since I was like a little kid. But Sylvester Stallone and Rambo, it makes me wonder if, I haven't listened to the Gematria Effect yet, but I wonder, I need to listen to, or maybe go to Rambo's channel and listen to some stuff that Rambo had pointed out. Hot Shot. Also, this episode being called Hot Shots, it made me think of Hot Shots Part 2, because for whatever reason, that movie was awesome when I was a kid with Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen, the guy with tiger's blood and so on. So I looked up that movie, and the president in the movie just so happens to be Jeff Bridges' father, Lloyd Bridges, and he died on March 10th, 310. So I was like, this is interesting. Plus this episode, it's all about vaccines and so on, right? So the episode starts off with this joke about a bat. And then later at the end, the bat comes back and so on. And it's like the whole episode is about vaccines and how people shouldn't be selfish and everyone should go get their vaccine and stuff like that. And it's like, You got to be kidding me. Remember how coronavirus is linked to bats and so on? This whole bat theme, the Batman movie. So it's like, this episode came out in 2016, all about vaccines, and there's a big joke about the bat. Just like how South Park had that episode called Shots, and Cartman turned into a pig every time the doctor tried to give him his shots. And that was in 2019, right after South Park got banned in China, so you knew that it was synced up to the Chinese pig year that was going on that year. And then what? 2 months later, coronavirus comes out of China, right? You know, it's just so stupid. You know, it's foreshadowing like crazy, but I don't know. We'll leave it at that. Just feel like I need to watch. Actually, I want to see when The Big Lebowski came out really quick. The Big Lebowski. You also had the other guy named Donnie who dies, right? Donnie. And I'm also wondering about who's the guy all the girls love? The old guy, his deep voice. God. He's in the part where they go into the... I'll find it really quick. Sam Elliott. I wonder if it's something to do with Sam Elliott. Just considering, it just makes me think of horses and stuff. I don't know. Maybe it's because of the ranch, or I don't know. I just re-listened to The Key to Gramercy Park by the band Deadsy, which is Cher's son, and then I think about the movie Mask with him and Ghost. I don't know. It makes me think of horses whenever I hear his voice, or at least I think of a ranch, so. Let's see here. When did The Big Lebowski come out? March 6th. 3/6, huh? In the U.S. at least. That's interesting. Once again, the 65th day of the year. The Big Lebowski. I'll look this up really quick. I'm sorry. But what's The Big Lebowski? I know it's 2/31, I remember. That horse number, 225, Nelson Mandela, his full name. Ralphie May died on like the 231st day of the year or something, or 231 days after his birthday. Let's look up Steve Buscemi really quick too. Where'd that freaking link go? There we go. Steve Buscemi, he is the guy who is Donnie. 12/13. Nothing stands out right away. I don't know. He looks like my friend Kenny, to tell you the truth. That's what I always think whenever I see that guy. He looks like a kid I graduated with. Let's see what his name is. I've recently been seeing my friend. I haven't seen him in a long time. And what's interesting when I'm thinking about him, though, is that his father actually died when we were in high school. So, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. We'll leave it at that. I'll do some more research. I'm going to sit here and bore you to death looking through all this stuff, so. Have a good one. We'll see what happens. Maybe there's a drowning story, a bridge collapse. I don't know. I'm trying to piece together this narrative, so. Have a good one. Peace.